if you're a parent looking for a childcare centre, how do you choose a good one? Are there some hidden clues you can look out for? And if you're an older worker looking to get into the sector, what should you know? More broadly, how are we doing as a community with this critical stage of a child's education, and what could we be doing better? Jamie Morris is the Chief Operations Manager at Early Learning Management, which helps manage a range of childcare centres and in Queensland, and he can offer an insider view, I would say, into some of those issues on the ground. Hello, Jamie.
Yeah, hi. How are you, Ash?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for coming in. What are some of these issues? Before we get to the issues, why don't we start with childcare more broadly? What does the research say about the impact of childcare, both good and bad, on a child's long-term future?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been in the sector for about 20 years. I started in the classroom setting, and all I thought was when I was an educator in a room was the children just needed to have fun. But in around 2015, I moved overseas and worked for the largest childcare provider in America, and I listened to a speaker, and they actually opened my eyes for the very first time. And there was a lot of research that they had done around what does it mean for children in an early childhood setting, and what that means if they've got a really good quality space thinking forward to when they're 18 and beyond. And it actually states that people who've got a really good start in life actually have more academic, they've actually got more financial aspects around them in their life, and also there's less crime and less drug use that they saw in the research. So, yeah, there's a lot of research around that. There were some negative aspects of that.
That's surprising. What are the negative aspects?
Yeah, the negative aspects was really around that social constructs about being independent and being able to be thoughtful, independent leaders and self-starters.
You mean they're less likely to be independent if they've gone to childcare?
Yeah, well, it's because there's always people around them all the time, right? So there's a lot of adult influence. And I don't know about you and your childhood, but for myself, there was a lot of that mystery of being sometimes alone, having adventures with your friends and not having that adult supervision around you. So, yeah, there are some of those aspects,
okay.
but having that foundation of children where, I don't know if the listeners know this, but brains are developing the most that they ever will be at any other part of their life at all. So children are able to learn so much more. So they have really good quality childcare by their educators giving them great educational outcomes. Children are able to adapt that learning aspect of their brain before they start formalised schooling.
They're very formative years, but we certainly pay university professors a lot more than childcare workers in such a critical stage of their life. So what would you say are some of the key issues facing the industry?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I know when I first started, just out of Year 12, I was one of maybe 20 people who applied for an interview. I remember showing up to meet the director. I was in a suit and tie because that's what I thought you did. And what I didn't realise doing my traineeship as, for my Certificate 3, not knowing what I was going to do, that I was kind of like auditioning for the role. There was about 20 other people, as I said, and slowly people were kind of getting tapped on the shoulder and off they went. And yeah, it was amazing. But looking at this point in time right now, the biggest issues that we're facing in the sector is the short of staffing. What we're finding after COVID is a lot of the international people that were working are slowly coming back. But a lot of people are leaving the sector in droves because there is a lot of regulations, which there should be. But unfortunately, there's also a lot of red tape around the documentation, the programming, and all of that kind of non-being with children, more than actually primary school teachers or high school teachers.
So that's not just the boss of the childcare centre that has to look after. The individual staff members have to follow that red tape as well?
Yeah, they do, unfortunately. And there is reasons for that from a quality perspective and, making sure that we're documenting, children's observations, learning stories, programming, all that stuff maybe behind the scenes that parents don't actually see. They might have a parent app that they see happy photos of all that kind of stuff, which is great. But there is a lot of documentation, checklists, all those paperwork. And I see across the nation, because I look after multiple services across the nation within our team. And the feedback is really weighing against what is the paperwork, what is all that stuff behind the scenes. And also, we're actually in the industry to make the difference of children's lives.
Can paperwork be simplified or is it all justified? What would you suggest to reduce the burden?
I think there needs to be a bit of a balance. As I say, I've gone to multiple services over the last 20 years and, what I see is there are some services out there that don't have quality, and to be able to have some of those check measures as a minimum standard at least allows children to have that really good experience, but there can sometimes be a bit of an overkill around that.
Jamie, I just put the call out for people to share their early childhood memories. Someone's texted in. Hi, Ashwin. When I was a child in kindergarten, I was left-handed. They would tie my left hand behind my back and make me use my right hand to write. Cheers from Scott. That doesn't still happen, does it, in childcare centres?
No. And I actually remember that. This is one of my very first memories in kindergarten. I sat down, I was in Wollongong at a school there, and I was being a five-year-old child, as you are in kindergarten, and the teacher said, everyone put up your hand with the hand that's facing to the window and pick up the pencil. And that's the pencil you're going to be using and writing with. There was no opportunity to be a left-hander.
Right.
Yeah.
What is this left-handed prejudice? Is that the devil's hand? Where did this come from?
Well, it was a Catholic school, I'm just saying.
Okay, yeah. There was interesting times back then. Someone else writes in, Hi, Ashwin. Ari, childhood memories. My father was afraid that I wouldn't be able to cope with school. On the other hand, my mother was afraid that the school wouldn't be ready for me. I was quite a handful as a youngster. Maria from Ipswich. Childcare does contain some handfuls, doesn't it? Some kids have discipline issues. I know friends that work in childcare, they get punched in the face by the kids. The kids sometimes do runners and end up at the intersection. There's some high energy in those centres.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, Ash. And I do find that over the years, I am finding that there are complexities with children in services. Our educators are being trained in children development, but a lot of the staff are not being trained around inclusion support services, around children with additional behaviours. If they've got, special requirements, they're not specifically trained around that. And there are children who do have access to our services, but what we do find is the limited amount of resources going into the services.
Well, sometimes the boss might not want to pay for that inclusion support, right? Because it can get expensive.
No, they do, but there is funding that the government does provide there, but there can be quite a long process to get that approval.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to issues in a little moment. Let's go back into the mind of a parent who was trying to choose a childcare centre for next year. They walk in, what should they be looking for to choose a good childcare centre?
Yeah, look, I think that is one of the biggest decisions that a parent faces about, parents are choosing to bring their child to a service for a variety of reasons. They might be going back to work. They might want a child to have that experience from a socialisation perspective. There's a lot of nervous energy when a parent is choosing a childcare centre. My advice is you really need to go with your gut, number one. Number two, I would also be making sure you do a centre tour and do a walkthrough and really ask the questions to that centre manager. Are they knowing your name when you're arriving? Are they knowing your child's name? When you're doing a walkthrough, are the staff all smiling and greeting at you? What does that interaction look like from an educator to a child perspective? And what's the overall feeling? The other place that I would also go to is go to Google. A lot of people are putting reviews up online and get that social proof of what that experience looks like. Now, remember, Google reviews can sometimes be a bit emotive, so people might have a bit of an emotion. So don't just go on that alone, but definitely do a walkthrough. Look at the quality of the service. Have a look at the way the classroom is displayed. Really think about, are you hearing music? Are you looking at different learning experiences? What is that grouping of children in that space as well? How many children are there? And then, if you're going to really dive a bit deeper, ask the person who's doing the tour, which is usually the centre manager, how long have you been here for? What are you working on at a centre level? And if you really want to understand the quality perspective, when was the last time they had assessment or rating from the regulators as well? What was that result?
Ratios, do you need to ask about that, or is everyone doing that okay?
Everyone should be doing that okay, because that is mandated by the regulations. But what they do want to think about is how many children are in that space, and yes, absolutely, how many staff are within that room as well.
You're listening to Jamie Morris, who's the Chief Operations Officer at Early Learning Management. We are looking into how you can choose a good childcare centre for your child and what some issues are that you should look out for. Robbie has texted in from Fernvale. I'm 59. Some people say I should still be in childcare. Thanks for that, Robbie. Another one that's come in. I'm studying to be... Let me expand that. I'm studying to be in early childcare. I'm studying to be an early childhood teacher.
Yeah,
and there really needs to be better wages. Mm-hmm. I'd love to work in the industry, but I can earn more in admin roles. I've been on prac in a childcare centre and loved it. It's sad I can't afford to work in the industry until I graduate. What can you say about the wages issue?
Yeah, look, I think there's been a long-standing issue around the pay parity of the workload that our early childhood educators are facing every day compared to a primary school or high school or even in a TAFE setting. The lives of these young, vulnerable children is paramount, and we need to make sure we've got quality educators who are dedicated, who want to be there all the time to really make a difference in children's lives. And unfortunately, what we're finding is that there has been a mass exodus in the sector, and the sector needs to be responding. And I also call upon the government around that to really have a call to action, to really look at the issues that is facing educators and the work that they're being asked to do.
It seems like that's been an issue for a while. Is there just no momentum? There's no will to change things?
Yeah, look, I think a shout out to the federal government for really making a difference around the childcare subsidy to make childcare a lot more affordable. And I think the federal government has done a really great job of that. But where the opposite issue is while the families are now thinking, yes, I can come in, it's more affordable, I've got more accessibility to that, the opposite side is getting staff to be able to be looking after that amount of children, and also to be able to have quality staff who are going to stay in the sector as well.
Beyond staff, grandparents can play a role in childcare. Tell me about the role that grandparents play in children's education today.
You know, it's paramount. I think grandparents have come from a very different life of today, where technology and, Google and all that stuff, grandparents have life experience. They have got a lot of stories. And it actually brings me back to a time in Sydney where I managed a before and after school care centre, and a grandparent who used to be a teacher of the school used to come every Wednesday in the afternoon and bring a lot of like fairy dolls and little, materials and everything, and spent time with the children. And what that grandparent did was to give the children a sense of wonder. And talking about that grandparent's childhood, that's what she did when she was 4 or 5. And it was a beautiful experience. And I think there's some really great ways to get grandparents involved into services.
It seems to be an area we're missing as a culture in general, isn't it? Yeah. Intergenerational connection and learning.
It's paramount. So I 2 years ago, I was working in Sydney, and there was a service in Hornsby, and 3 houses down from the childcare centre, every Friday the children would put on little uniforms and go to a nursing home. And what they used to do every Friday is go and meet the grandmas and the grandpas. And that was in a nursing home. They set out 4 or 5 tables, and at one table there was drawing, and the other table there was Play-Doh, and there was different activities, and the children could just rotate around. And the joy that I saw from those grandmas and grandpas that were called was just amazing. There was tears, and it just really lit up the room that the children were able to inspire the older generation with the youthfulness. And the nurses told us, that was the highlight of the week. But alternatively, the children were able to also develop skills to work with older people as well, and have that co-learning that was occurring in the intergenerational program. Yeah.
You're listening to Jamie Morris, who's from Early Learning Management, talking to us about some of the issues in childcare. A couple of you have texted about Cyclone Jasper. I should let you know, ABC Far North Queensland is doing their own evening show tonight to keep people directly in the area informed. So if you go to ABC Far North's page, you'll get rolling coverage of everything that's going on, and we'll keep you posted as much as we can outside of that area on this show. But ABC Far North is the page and the Facebook page and radio station you want to go to for that rolling coverage of Cyclone Jasper tonight. It's 26 minutes past 7. If you've got a childcare memory, you can share it with me on 0467 922 612 or call 1300 222 612. We heard from someone earlier about the difficulty of wages, which might be even more of a concern when you're a younger person trying to save for a house. What if you're an older person who's just looking for a bit of part-time work? How does childcare stack up as a source of employment for someone who's a little bit older?
Yeah, I think that we need to be different in this day and age. And I think there's a modern day workforce. A lot of the sector, 99% are female. I'm probably one of the 1% that have been in the sector for so long. And that also comes with, the younger generation stepping into the workforce, becoming mothers, going on maternity leave, and then even coming back into the sector as well. And I think as employers, we need to be open-minded about it's not just a Monday to Friday job anymore. That's not the expectation. We've got to be open about different days that people can work and the different flexibilities within that workplace as well. Of course, we need to also think about making ratios for children and having those quality educators. So I just don't feel that it's a one-stop shop anymore, and we've got to really think more broadly and a bit more open around that perspective as well. And I think in this day and age, post-COVID, I think we all had a bit of a light bulb moment that there can be different ways to work.
I like that idea. Everyone is adapting. Even the ABC has work from home options and work at the studio office options. Some industries have a military tradition, like hospitals and nurses. They are run in a very militaristic way. Yeah. What's childcare's origins? Did it have quite a strict disciplinarian origin, or was it quite a loose origin story?
Well, I think early childhood education has got a lot more of the professionalism within the space. I think it's very prevalent in Australia. But I think if we go back to where it did begin, it really did begin because there were working parents, especially in the urban areas of Brisbane where we're at the moment, or Sydney or Melbourne. And there needed to be alternative care to the family structure where grandma or auntie or whoever wasn't around, and those spaces were established. Before the current regulations and the qualification, there was an amount of beautiful people who may not have had the formalised qualifications but really made a difference in children's lives. And then over the years, there was a lot more research about what it meant for children to be in a space around early childhood education and setting them up for life. And I think we've gone in a really good way there. So it probably stemmed from that. And if you think about early childhood, most services are open from 7 to 6 p.m, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that really is to help support those working families who may need that care as well.
Kath from Kingaroy writes in. Kath from Kingaroy, good evening, Ashwin. As an early childhood educator for more than 20 years, I would recommend, as your guest has suggested, that new parents do a centre visit before enrolling their child. Look at things like how well-resourced the centre is. Does it feel overcrowded? What's their food policy? Do staff appear happy? Are they interacting with children on their level? Are they supporting the children's learning? Do the children appear happy and engaged? These are just some of the things you need to take into account and ask questions, lots and lots of questions.
Who is that, sorry?
That's Kath from Kingaroy.
Catherine, amazing. What great feedback that you have. And you're touching on the menu. We're talking about early childhood education where we need to have great learning environments for children. But on the flip side, children need to be nourished. A lot of our working families are really looking for those convenience aspects, such as nappies and such as all the other inclusive programs. But we also got to consider, what does it mean from a menu perspective to help feed the mind? And
it's not Dagwood dogs anymore. It's quite advanced cuisine there, isn't there?
Do you know what? When I was in year one, I loved fairy bread, which was butter, white bread and sprinkles. Not so nutritionist. It doesn't really help the research there to help children set up for a big, busy day that they're a part of.
That's right. Okay, so there's a few different areas we've touched on. Any other industry issues we should focus on addressing in this country?
Yeah, look, I really think in this country, what we really need to think about is that 70% of the market within Australia are actually privately owned, not part of the corporate big players. And there is a space for the big players. Absolutely there is. And they have a voice and they are helping to steer the ship in the right direction. But what we also need to make sure that we're really considering, and I guess that's what I do within my role, is really support the small providers. They may have one centre, they may have 5 or 7 centres, but it's a really lonely world in that space and having to navigate all the regulative spaces and the changes that are constantly occurring. And I really believe as a nation, what we really need to focus on is those small guys. It is the biggest market share and it is the biggest employer of early childhood educators. And also the statistics also talk that they're getting better results from the assessment or rating perspective when the Department of Education is coming out.
A few good tips there. Jamie Morris, who you've been listening to, is the Chief Operations Manager at Early Learning Management. Jamie, thank you for coming in tonight.
Hey, pleasure.